Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing? It is webinar time. This is Jeremiah, and we are rounding up, finishing up our CAD for Beginners series with number 3. So if that sounds like what you want to see, then you are in the right place. I have a couple super quick housekeeping items. Namely, I want to let you know this is being recorded, of course, so it's going to be right there on the website along with number 1 and 2. So that'll be great. But also you're watching the live one right now, and there is a Q&A button down there at the bottom right of your screen. And I recommend you just click it now, get it situated so that way it's not in your face, and get it right where you want it. It's gonna be a little quicker for you to type a question to us. Hopefully you'll have some questions. We are here to answer those while we move through these things. But also you're going to be able to see the answers that we type to other people's questions. So it just makes a fun little companion reminding you that you are watching this live webinar with us. And we're going to be going over cool CAD stuff. We are focusing more on, the proper way to use CAD, like with anything. But certainly in CAD, there's a lot of different ways to do things. And we are primarily showing you what's called best CAD practices. And so, instead of saying, well, we're going to show the default way to do it, or all possible ways to do any particular thing, we're going to show you the best way, the recommended way to do certain things. And that's what primarily is helping us to kind of speed through all this CAD for beginner content in barely 3 hours of webinars. So hopefully you'll appreciate that. But so that's what you're in for store for. And this will apply to beginners or anyone just kind of wants to brush up. If you've used CAD for 20 plus years and you would like to know what are these recommended best practices that we say are so great, well, you're about to find out. So Jake, let's take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jer. Welcome, everybody. As Jer said, CAD for Beginners 3. This is me. I haven't changed. I'm still here and do a lot of stuff. So wanted to just briefly look back at what we did talk about in the first 2-part series. So the first one, we went over basic steps from a CAD beginning standpoint. So navigation, setting what the scale is, what are your units, all those different little drafting tools and the terminology that we generally use for those kind of drafting techniques. Part 2 went really deep into customizing stuff. So all right, you're playing into CAD and you want to set things up the way that you want them set up. How does that work? How do those function? So there's not going to be a lot of that kind of basic stuff here, but hopefully you have watched part 1 and part 2. Again, if you haven't, the links will be provided in this recorded session when we post it, as well as here listed here. But looking forward, and any of those who can name this movie, when will then be now? It's soon. So we are here. We are going to be going over named objects, specifically what are defined into drawings. So things like layers, blocks, text, leaders, dimension styles. We'll even mention table styles a little bit, but then really going into the importance of purge and what that actually means. So it doesn't look like we have a lot to go over here, 2 simple things, but we can go pretty deep into stuff. So please, as we start going through stuff, definitely get your questions in, and maybe we can wrap it into it. What won't be covered here, because we do have several side webinars already covering this, is more on the sheet setup and the XREF practices and drawing setups, stuff like that. That is a more advanced CAD technique, which as a part of this 3-part series, we felt like we've got those kind of dialed in other places. So that's where we're at. So I want to start off with just understanding some of this terminology. And I underline the word terminology because a lot of times, we say, what are the definitions of these guys? And technically they are definitions, but we're going to be using the word definition a lot differently today. So we're going to use terminology to understand what it is. So layers, pretty simple. It is a way to organize, to assign those colors, any given line types, and a bunch of other things, plotting, transparencies, that kind of stuff. So that's what a layer is. A block is basically a collection of objects combined into a single named object. So it could be broken out into different layers, the line types that you're going to be using, or the object types, circles and polylines and hatches and that kind of stuff. But those are all wrapped into a single entity, making it a lot easier for the system and you to move things around and adjust stuff. The text and the MText, these are the text styles, and what we're going to really focus on would be considered a text style. But from the named object perspective, we have two different kind of text. The first one is mainly just a single line of characters, font, and spacing. It's very, very basic, and it is limited in what it can do, but it's also good to know that you have multiple different text options here. The MText is a multi-line text, and this is an entity that supports additional customization to that. So formatting, paragraph formatting, being able to set the different fonts and stuff if you need it to, but it is a lot more editable. And that's the difference between the two. So if we were going to look at what the text looks like versus what the MText looks like, just trying to identify those is how you do that. MLeaders are multi-leaders, and these combine a leader, arrow, and text into a single entity. So similar to blocks where it's grabbing multiple things and making it one particular item. This is what an MLeader does. There's a lot of additional functionality that it can provide instead of keeping all of these three things separate. Dimensions obviously are what display those measurements when we're lining out those measurements in AutoCAD. These also have a lot of different options of how they look, what textiles are used, the distances between the gaps of those measurements, whether they're showing as tick marks or arrows or dots. There's a lot of different things that comprise a dimension or that DimStyle there. And then tables, of course, are different things altogether, but it holds textiles. They're rows and columns. The cells and styles can be adjusted. They're a little bit more complicated and confusing to work with. So we will probably be leaving this just off the table a little bit, no pun intended. But those are what we consider the terminology of these named objects. Okay, so why would we actually use named objects? Well, let's take this little example of some dimensions. We've got several different dimensions around the plan, and we want to modify something. Now, you could go through each one of these and manually adjust the properties of a given dimension, but we have what we call a DimStyle, which allows us to apply the same setting across multiple items that share that same style, which in turn, once we change stuff, will set that style to everything assigned to that particular DimStyle. Okay, so we're just making, CAD is allowing us to make these changes one time across multiple things without having to, manage each individual one. So let's go ahead and define what we mean by defined, or the definition of something. Okay, so when a named object actually exists in the drawing, whether you see it or not, it is defined in the drawing. So as an example, a block that is placed into a drawing has a name, and that block name gets defined into the drawing. Okay, an MLeader has a style, a DimStyle has a style, a text style. All of these have different names that get defined into the drawing. So why does this matter? Well, if we were going to look at these two files side by side, you might not actually see any difference here. But from what is defined versus not defined in the drawing can absolutely impact. And this could be for good and it could be for bad. So maybe we have some particular definitions. Maybe they're the textiles or the DimStyles that we're saving into our template that we now get to start a new drawing, and all of these styles are now ready to rock and roll and we're good. However, if we are in the practice of doing a project and then just deleting all the stuff and then saving it as a new project because we've got all of our layouts set up and different things like that, well, that's absolutely a bad practice. And the reason for that is because all of the other things that you removed could potentially be defined in that drawing still, bloating that stuff. So when we're looking at these, that's a big difference from a blank file perspective. And the reason why we see so many different large file types come in is sort of a result of some of this stuff, aside from all the proxies and other corruption items that come into. So let's talk about really quickly those named objects. They all have places that we get to modify stuff. So these are all what we're going to cover today, basically, and where you find these and how they interact with AutoCAD as you're doing your designs. Every one of these are basically, these managers are basically each one of these named objects homes. So if I need to adjust any layers, I would go to my layer properties manager. The little parenthesis is the shortcut key for that particular command. I highly, highly recommend that you know it, memorize it, use it, because it'll make it a lot easier as we get into it and you're trying to remember where you go for that particular guy. That'll be a lifesaver for you. So each one of these, again, has their own place and they have their own functionalities in how they interact with CAD. So we'll go through sort of each one of these individually in just a little bit. So this is, and if we're all familiar with the purge command, as you type the full word purge, this is the dialog box that you get. Now, this has come a long way since maybe some of the first uses of CAD. I tried to stay away from this box because it wasn't the most helpful, but in the last few years, they've actually got some great new little features here, specifically this find non-purgeable items. Sometimes you would be maybe really adamant about cleaning your files and you're really good about it, and some things just would not purge out for some reason. This find non-purgeable items is a really, really cool feature, and we'll kind of go over how to utilize it. But just know that this is a great place to start seeing what you actually have defined in your drawing. It'll be a kind of an eye opener if you're finding stuff in there that you didn't know was there to begin with. So I know I don't see any questions as of yet, but guys, please, 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 as we get going here, shoot out any questions that you got, because I want to make sure that we have time to cover them. But we're going to just jump right over into CAD. So first and foremost, we're going to just kind of reiterate back on that blank file example to see how we might find some of this stuff that might be defined in this drawing. So we're going to just start out with the simple, and this is honestly what I would do just in general when you guys are looking at your office template. Maybe you're trying to clean up your standards and you're just taking a look at what you've got existing, or if you're given a file to work on, I always start looking at what we've got going on. So right off the bat, I don't see anything in my drawing, but I do see quite a few layers here. And so why is that, right? Well, first and foremost, if we are holding these layers here for the purpose of not having to create them again, we do have a great little tool here on the FX admin ribbon called load layers and save layers. Okay. And if you save layers based on what you have in this given drawing that you run this tool, you can actually save the status and the condition of all of this information, but in a way that if I were to open up a blank drawing, and we'll go ahead and just run that right now. I'll go ahead and save layers. We'll go ahead and I'll actually do it in my templates folder and CAD for beginners 3, save. Okay, so these are the layers that I want to start out every project with just because, you know, they're good. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank drawing, and this one is going to be a little cleaner. It's not going to have any layers, but I can hit that load layers button and go to where I saved. And once I say okay, it will load in everything based on the conditions that we set to it. So line types, whether they're on or off, which one was active at the time of saving it. It will set it up exactly how we want it so that we can keep going. Okay, so right off the bat, this load layers and save layers button is really, really cool for that purpose. So great, we've just simplified our template a little bit more. What's the next one we're going to go into? We'll go ahead and look for blocks. Now, how would we look for any blocks that were defined in the drawing? There's a couple different ways. I bounce back and forth between these two, and maybe Jer, if you've got a preference, the way that I would generally do this is if you run the block edit command, so BE, it will actually show you blocks in the drawing listed there. So this, if it was a blank, truly blank drawing, this would be blank. The other way of doing it would be the insert command. Now, I am impartial to the new insert dialog box that CAD has come up with. So classic insert is a great way to get to the original insert dialog box here that most people might be familiar with. But again, this drop down here is going to show you all block definitions in the drawing itself. So either way, classic insert or insert, if I can spell it right, is going to show you what you might have in the current drawing. So there's quite a few things in here that the system sees, right? So the next one, so we know we got some blocks in there. Let's look for textiles. So we're going to close those guys for now. So textiles was ST. Now I'm typing these commands, but I want to draw your attention to those using FX CAD. The benefit of using FX CAD is we've made it a lot cleaner. AutoCAD is going to be set up a little differently, so you're not going to see this. But on the Manage tab, we've listed things out in a really nice little box for all of your different little managers. So know this is here. I generally would go to Manage and just find where those are. Obviously, blocks aren't a part of a manager per se. So that's why we went the insert or block edit command. But from a textile perspective, or our DimStyles, MLeaders, and table styles, all of those are just chilling right here. But we'll go ahead and type ST. And I can see what I've got defined in my drawing from a textile perspective. Now, again, if this is sort of your office standard from leaving the most common styles that you use for MText or just straight up text, then that is definitely one thing. However, from a trying to manage which styles that you want to use, I'm going to suggest that we look at this on the FX Site tab, our text manager. And this text manager is, and it's prompting me for this here because it's going to help determine our font sizes. So it's kind of spoiling a little bit here, but we'll let this pop up. So this text manager is dedicated to the preference set that you have. So as we talk about our standards a lot and having that land effects preference set for holding those office standards, here's where we can add additional text styles in addition to, you know, the ones that you generally see listed in the preference set specifically. This is that same list, but it allows us to include additional text styles that we might want to use. The nice thing about this is that we're not basing everything from a CAD text height perspective and needing to know that our different styles are set up at the right heights and stuff like that. We are still applying the same nice land effects standard from a what do I want that point font size to be on paper, and the system will automatically size it based on the scale we set to the drawing. So if we set up all of our different text styles here, we can now integrate with the MText command and the text command, but do that simple math to already set the text at the heights that they should be, preparatory for your paper space. So this text manager here is kind of like the holder of all of your styles. And once they get defined in the drawing, obviously, this is where they would land as quote unquote being used in the drawing. Okay. Now I do see we might need to go back a little bit. Jared, do you want to answer any questions at this point?
We did have one question, and I was not following what you did when you brought in those layers, so I wasn't able to answer that myself.
Okay. Yeah, so the import object, so I think we're talking about from the load and layer, save layer states. This strictly brings in the layers themselves, not any objects. And that's kind of the nice thing, is because at any given point, if we don't want just random stuff in the drawing just so that it generates the layers. This just generates the layers for us without bringing in all of those erroneous objects, which is nice also because you get to, if you need to purge the drawing and those layers disappear, you simply need to load those layers again and they'll show back up. So there's no needing to hold on to little objects and stuff like that. Obviously, a layer will appear if there is an object in the drawing, but and that's being used, but yeah, there's no objects that get actually applied to it. So, all right, MLeaders. Let's go over some MLeader stuff really quick. Let's see if we got any. Doesn't look like we have any, and this is sort of an indication whether you're using the standard style that is provided in CAD, and that's just the one that is defined in the drawing. There always is going to be a standard option. So this one looks like it's pretty clean. There's no additional MLeaders there. And then let's go ahead and check our DimStyles just to see. We have the standard one, which looks like there may have been some overrides to it. So again, maybe this is your office setup, and that is what it is. So just getting a sense from a blank standpoint what we got going on, I'm going to go ahead and run the purge command. Now, a lot of people actually don't know about this command, the land effects version of purge. And Jerry, you'll have to correct me because I think it may have changed. Is it 4 times that it purges fully, or is it 5? Or
I think
it's a couple.
4. The classic one, we picked it up from an old, it's one of the earliest little auto list programming ones, because you need to purge multiple times, because you purge the block. Now that the block is purged, now you can purge the layers within the block. What if you have a block within a block within a block? So that's why you have to purge multiple times.
Mhm.
And so it's actually a very, very simple thing to code. It just says repeat 4 times, purge, so it's like 2 lines of code. So that's why it's a real classic intro to Lisp programming tool to make.
Yeah. So the standard purge dialog box, you can check what you want to purge, but you got to go through this kind of rigorous process of making sure that you're checking everything, and then you got to confirm each one or don't confirm, and then purge the nested stuff. And there's a lot of just different options. So if we just simply type PRG instead of PURGE, it will go through that full purge process. So if we were going to now look at our layer list, it looks like I still got a random layer here that it didn't purge. Something to keep in mind is whatever layer is active or whatever style is active and it's still not being used, it won't purge itself until you kind of deactivate it. So if we run purge again, looks like it removed it because now it's not being utilized essentially. So we can go to our text styles. We can see, looks like everything is cleared out of there. The dimension styles obviously weren't touched, and the multi-leader style wasn't anything. And now let's check our blocks. So let's go to block edit, check out that, and look at how clean that list is now, right? So that simple purge got rid of all of those definitions that were in the drawing. Okay, so anything not being used, it got removed, which is a lot cleaner, a lot safer in the grand scheme of things. So that's that. Let's go ahead and try that one thing, because I did that on my my clean blank drawing. Let's do purge one more time. See how that runs with our newfound knowledge of what the purge does. This one left a lot of additional items, which is interesting. So I'll go ahead and activate so that he's there. Okay, so got rid of one more. Let's look at our blocks. Oh, it looks like I still got some random ones in here somewhere. Not sure where those are. So again, trying to figure out where those could be. If we're looking in a blank drawing or even in a file, just making sure Zoom Extents is run is such a lifesaver. Can save you a lot of time. Oh, looks like there was something out in the middle of space. So here they are. Now, if I didn't know, and I didn't run Zoom Extents, and I open up my purge dialog box, here's where this find non-purgeable items can really kick into play here. So we can go ahead and now expand things where these named items are actually in use somewhere. So we can expand our blocks. We can see where he is. And it looks like there's some stuff from a dimension style override. It looks like it is account 1 in a dimension style that is not purged out. This guy, it looks like he's an inserted block and it's on this layer. So if we look at our actual layers, we'll notice that this guy here is also listed, and it's saying, hey, there's a block inserted on that layer, right? Anywhere that you see this little magnifying glass, click him, because it'll take you right to that particular item and select it for you so that you can make the determination on whether or not it needs to go away. So right off the bat, we are starting to see that, okay, now that block is gone because that layer is gone as well, right? So a lot of really cool tools here. Let's look at our table styles. Default, there it is. This layer looks like there's an object on it. Oh, it looks like there's a table on that layer. That's why, right? So a lot of different things that help you identify where those are and go. So just from a managing those named objects perspective helps. That purge dialog box and seeing what items can be purged, and then running that purge command starts getting us back to that clean state. So let's see here. Got that. Text styles, covered that. So let's go into an actual file. Let's start seeing how some of this stuff interacts. So when we're in a drawing and we're trying to figure out and determine what stuff actually is, it might be pretty common sense here, but I'm going to say it anyways, is open up your properties dialog box and select something. See what it is, because it might be, you know, not an entity that you assumed it was. Okay, so we can very clearly see, especially when it comes to text, and there's where I may have removed a text inadvertently, so I'm going to put one in. Ignore that I am showing you that it's text. Okay, and I'm going to put in a piece of MText next to it. Now, if we are going to look at these from just a visibly eyeball shot here, they look basically identical. If I select him and if I select him, that's when they definitely start looking different. So just triggering that difference from an identity standpoint can tell you what it is. But again, it's really, really good to just open up that properties dialog box and see what it's telling you that it is. Okay, so that one says MText. This one's going to say align dimension. This guy is a multileader, right? So we've got a lot of different cues that we can start looking at and kind of making those judgment calls on what we need to do from that point on, right? The properties is definitely going to be something, and I've got my own feelings on this, and I think there's a place across the board for different situations and circumstances here. But in general, I'm going to try and plead, and I think Jared will agree with me. Don't manually change individual items, whether that is a particular line and changing its entities and properties of a particular line separate than a particular leader style and changing its heights and stuff like that. Try and change where it's sourcing from. Try and change that style so that everything is consistent, because it's only going to open this horrible can of red herrings that you have to try and chase and track down and try to adjust to get everything back to a general sense. So I don't know if you have anything else to say about that, Jer.
I think you're very correct. Yeah, it's all about doing the least possible. The one I always go back to is just working in Microsoft Word, and we're kind of all guilty of that. We just grab the title and we center it, and we change the font, we change the size, right? And then for our name, we just set that to right align and change the font for that, and right. But we should be using styles in Word, and you should have a title style and you should have a body style, and it just makes things simpler. And with CAD though, the complexity level just is way larger, and so you just always want to work smarter, not harder.
Well said. So let's work smart and not hard. So we'll go ahead and we'll kind of just take a look at what we mean then by using these styles. So we're going to kind of look at these dimension styles, and this does very much approach a whole other topic of how we utilize dimension styles, and we are going to be doing a webinar on dimension styles specifically, I believe, at a later time. So we're going to touch this very lightly But if you have any questions, definitely let us know. Again, looking at it from a properties perspective, we get to see a lot of stuff like what the style actually is. What is it assigned to? What is that style that we're looking for? Okay. So on any given piece, it is going to show us what style of text it is, what the actual MLeader style is, named style is, what the named dimension style is. So we can actually go again and change that specific style and not on an individual level. So we can go into our dimension styles here, and we'll see that we got quite a few different types of DimStyles defined in this drawing. And that's why it's important to understand what it is and clicking on the items so that you know which one you're actually trying to change. Because I've made this mistake before, is I assumed it was one style and I change a bunch of stuff and nothing happens. Nothing updates. And I go, why in the world did that not work? And it's because something was wrong. Maybe it was the wrong scale DimStyle that I was setting it to, or that it was assigned to. So you got to just make sure you're picking the right one and go ahead and modify. And when we modify this, we're changing this one time. So basically all of these different, most of these options are in some way a part of this properties here, but we're doing this from a global standpoint now. So if I want my my arrowheads to be these ticks and the text, that's random. I don't know why it would be that. So let's go ahead and get it back to our dimension text. And from a units perspective, we just don't want any rounding or precisions there. And so we're going to say okay to that. And as soon as we see that, you can see the preview change and an update. But as soon as we close, you'll notice that all dimensions that apply to that specific style now get updated. So very, very quick, very easy to make those modifications. Same thing here, right? We've got our text frame D20. Now, MLeaders, again, throw in an additional complexity level because it's dealing with text, and depending on what you're working with, even in land effects, there is a whole level of user-defined blocks that get put in addition to some of the default CAD standards. So we do got to be careful with that, but we do have full control over some of these main leader options and styles. So maybe I do have a standard of using the spline, keep my text horizontal, and maybe I do want to change this. Maybe I don't want the frame anymore, right? And maybe I want that arrow style to be different. Again, this is a user arrow and it's pulling in a block specifically. So again, the complexity can absolutely exponentially grow here. So we got to be careful. But maybe I want an additional point, and we'll do the underline the top line guy. So this is my new style, my default definition that I want for this guy here. So when I say close, you're going to see that right off the bat, anything with that style got the new look. So if I were to put an MLeader in using this style here, it would automatically go there. Additional commands for that MLeader, I can obviously add a leader, which now takes hold of those conditions, right? So maybe there were 2 areas here that I wanted to do, right? And manipulate. So I have full control over now how those styles look. And as I put in a new MLeader, and I'll just have to text frame. So we're going to go ahead and put in a new MLeader here. And the style that I want is this text frame. And as I put him in, And let's put into detailed text is fine. Right. So now if you look at this MLeader style, and actually Jer, that's interesting. It gave me a text frame without a scale. Why is my scale not set? Well, that's cool. See, look at these fun little hiccups, right? So the cool thing about what happens, and I don't know why my scale just disappeared on me. It created a definition for not a scale.
Yeah, something got, well, you're banging around on this file a lot.
I've been
yeah.
doing all kinds of things and undoing and stuff.
But yeah,
so
because
you'll
if
have
it
to
was,
forgive me.
I imagine it's a units got changed or something, and that scared
Yeah,
it.
it's possible. But the cool part, and talking right about these definitions and what happens, right, is okay, that didn't act the way that I wanted it to. And why? Well, these have two totally different MLeader styles defined in the drawing now. So at this point, since these guys already existed, I could absolutely change him to match that DimStyle that was used. Or again, delete, technically purge the drawing. Let's get that old definition out. That dash blank guy is not here anymore, right? We still have our existing one. So if we go ahead and we try doing that same DimStyle, you can see that he actually worked this time, right? So right off the bat, knowing where to go and how these things are actually interacting is super, super important, okay? So in addition to that, let's go ahead and edit. So that was MText, or sorry, MLeaders. The text style stuff obviously is all about what fonts are being used and the style in which we're using from these text styles perspective. And that's, again, that whole word example is a great way to kind of think of all of these things here. Is you have different styles that you want applied to different things, whether they're the callouts, the schedule text, your dimension text, any other kind of notation text. All of those things should be given a style, and LandEffects handles all of those in a given sense based on the commands that you're using. So just understand that this is where all of those things land. Now, maybe something has changed in your preference set, and I'm going to do it over here so that we can kind of hopefully see this change happen in real time. And this is where it gets hard to break something and then fix it on the fly, because it does it automatically typically. So we're going to go ahead and use a different font. Maybe this is my architect text for my plant callouts, and then let's just do dimension text. Let's change him to Roman simplex because I'm old school like that. All right. So if we come back over here and we start placing these things and they're the wrong styles from a text perspective, we have an awesome command. Instead of having to go through your text style manager and fixing each font style and matching it to what you need it to be, use the read command. And the redefine all text styles command is going to take any of the LandEffects generated text styles and update them to match your preference set. So if I do this, it's going to automatically change any of those text styles that it sees. Now, I didn't change call out text, and that's why that didn't change. But you can see everything else that I actually had updated from a fonts perspective, it changed automatically for me, which makes it super nice and super convenient to have to change any kind of text styles. We won't be able to do this with all of my files open, but under FX admin, Batchman, it is one of the options to redefine those text styles in drawings. So if you're going to do this on a global level and you wanted to update fonts throughout a lot of your different drawings, whether those are block files that have text or details that are using the land effects text styles, the system will go through and update all of those in each individual file, making that workflow very, very quick. All right, let's get into blocks. I think blocks is the #1 headache for a lot of people and where we should be changing things and how we should be changing things. So first and foremost, if we're not using under FX site, these blocks right here, not even the land effects generated ones, but your own saving your blocks into the system, I strongly suggest doing so. Not only is this place a really good home and organization structure for you to put in your stuff, but it gives you a lot of different capabilities, depending on what you're kind of using it for. But specifically, if you're looking in to organizing, oh, I clicked something too fast. If you're looking to organize your guys' standards from a title block perspective or a sheet layout perspective, to have things easily placed into the drawing, again, keeping away from trying to put any and all blocks into a template file just so that they're already there and ready to use. We're trying to pull those definitions out of that template file and putting them into a more usable structure. And having them here is definitely the starting point of that. So I want to introduce a new feature that I don't think anybody will know about. But if you're already using this block organization structure here, you have now the ability to take and select one of these guys and hit edit, and this little open file button. So we're going to now talk about what's done in a working drawing and what's done at a source block level and where we should be changing stuff, because obviously if I'm doing this project and I've made all these this whole design, we obviously can tell that this is the same block throughout the drawing. We know that this is the same block throughout the drawing, but just understanding that how CAD simplifies things is that it takes one block, it gets inserted, and now that block is defined in the drawing. I mean, it really applies to all of these, but we're going to do this at the block level. So if all of these blocks were removed from the drawing, just straight up gone, that block definition is still in the drawing, okay? That text style is still in the drawing. That dimension style is still in the drawing. We could, by all accounts, do a insert of that particular tree and granted it inserted it at its original scale there. I think my my block was set to 30 scale. And we could insert it again without needing to go find it. It didn't exist from a visible standpoint here, but that block definition still existed. And if that block definition is in the drawing, it'll be used. Now, where that comes to be a problem is if, say, I had a drawing that I wanted to take this block, because this is the nice tree block that I wanted to use. I did a copy with base point. I grabbed him and I wanted to use him in this same drawing. So I go ahead and I paste him, and he comes in like this. And I go, okay, why in the world is he just a bigger version of this other little guy? Okay. So I'm going to look and I'm going to see, I'm going to select this block and I go, oh, he's LAFX tree 001. Let's see what this guy was named. Oh, he's got the same block definition. Okay. So what does that actually mean? Well, because that block definition existed in the drawing, it took on those properties and it just inserted it based on the scale of what that other block was. So how do we get around that? Well, we definitely got to figure out a different name of a block, whether that is deleting all these and purging that block definition out, or it's simply renaming a block. So maybe that tree 001, maybe we change him in this drawing to be something else. And obviously, if it's something that already exists, it's going to tell you that it can't be that way, right? So you can get away with doing additional names there. We just say, okay. So now, if I go ahead and I try to paste, oops, I should go and copy that guy again. Copy with base point. We come over here and we paste him. He gets to be inserted as that new block definition because that tree 001 didn't actually exist anywhere else in this current drawing. We obviously kept him in the drawing. We changed his block definition, but I wouldn't even consider that like the best approach. And I know we're showing you how to do the most efficient and the best practices here. But I'm just kind of showing you why that block actually got defined differently. The real proper way would be to structure your plant, save this plant into the system as its own unique block name, and have a structure already set up to where you're not going to be having multiple different block styles using that same block name. Just straight up, that shouldn't be a thing that is done. So do we have any questions as of yet? I know we're coming to an end here, so we gotta kind of hurry. But
Yeah, definitely time to get in your last questions. We're coming to the end here.
okay. Well, let's talk about, or let's do this little button guy now. We're gonna go ahead and open up this source block. So we talked about copying over a block and maybe renaming it to a different block definition and stuff like that. But maybe physically I wanted to alter his look. I can double click a block and it'll open up the block editor. I can select that block and just type BE for block edit. Or I can type block edit and I have to pick it from the list. So I definitely would recommend selecting it and then doing block edit so that it highlights it first. But we can edit this block right in the drawing. And maybe we wanted to simply draw a circle around and save it. Well, we're saving these changes to this block definition, okay? But we're saving this in this working drawing here. The source file is actually not being touched at all. So what happens when I go and I try and insert that block right here into a blank drawing? I think it's safe to say I renamed him, so I don't even have him here. But you can see tree 001 obviously is my original one. Maybe I needed to alter him really quick. So I'm going to go ahead and edit. I'm going to open up this source file. I'm going to really quickly make a tree 003 version of this guy. So I'm just going to save as. Don't you guys copy my cool blocks. Okay, so I got this guy. I'm going to make a slide, save him in there. Okay. So now we're good. So I'm going to go to the source block here. I've got my tree 003. I'm going to place him, and 003 in my lobster mansion file had a circle, but this guy definitely doesn't. Okay. And the reason that is because it's already defined in this drawing, and we only changed it in this drawing specifically. So even if I copy him and bring him into this drawing, he's going to be the original guy still. Okay. So how do we get him to be updated? Well, very, very easy. And maybe I want to go back. We'll just go back since it's already like this. I want to go back to the version of what my source file is. We can run, there's a lot of other manually done ways, but we're going to skip right to the fun one. And that's Redefine Block. Redefine Block is a land effects command, and it does have to work on a block within the blocks folder structure. Okay, so the block has to exist in one of these main categories within the blocks folder in your land effects folder. If they're not here, it will not update that block. Okay, but if that block exists, and that's again why we suggest even utilizing that structure to begin with, is so that you can take hold of these tools. But if I click on that given block, it's going to find that block definition, and it's going to reinsert it and redefine that block definition as needed. So we can again take it from here, edit, open that file. This would be the more appropriate way, especially from I'm making a global change. Now, if you're making a change drawing specific that you do not want, a part of anything else, then don't change the source block. But if you do want it to kind of take hold for the next applicable drawing that you're going to use this in, then you would open up that source block. You would save those changes. But first, MSlide, I'll follow my best practices here and update that slide file definition, and then save and close the drawing. Once that drawing is closed, you can type redefine block, click on the block, and the system will insert that new definition. Okay. So that's kind of the inner workings of the redefine block, DimStyles, the MStyles, the text styles, all of those guys, depending on the tools that we're using, harness that control of creating that new style. Okay, so just keep in mind as you are setting up your drawing, using some of these tools. So maybe we want a leader with text, and we want to choose a different style altogether. Okay. Know that land effects is going to help customize based on, what you're trying to achieve here. And it created a unique text, or sorry, this is an MLeader style for that given situation. So if something needed to be changed and you wanted to update these guys here, know that you have that control now of creating that. You can simply change it like this, or using match properties to be able to update what it actually looks like there. So I think we'll leave it at that point. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, we got 2 questions. It'd be great to take care of these real quick. One, I think quicker one, didn't know Laura did mention in the chat window. Just she says she tends to have difficulty getting the scale of dotted line types.
Mm,
And I wondered if you wanted maybe just very, very briefly, just a touch on the line type scale. Really that's more of our sheet setup, but if you want to just touch on that super, super quickly, and we'll get to the other question.
sure. So yeah, let's go over to this guy because he's got some line types in here. The line type scale, and again, this might be going a little too deep, and Jerry, you can clarify here for me, but the line type scale is definitely as it was created from a line type perspective. So each one has a given scale. Generally, it's one. It might be less than that. But again, trying to alter these by your line type scale command. So that's LT scale. If this LT scale is set to the appropriate viewport scale, that will generally give you the look that you're going for. Anything too small, maybe leaving line type scale, LT scale at 1 is going to be just too small for what you're trying to do. And so you're sitting here choosing these, and then you're adjusting this guy up manually to try and make it fit. That's definitely not the appropriate way. So trying to keep your LT scale at a more appropriately scaled for your layout is going to be how those display the best. But also keep in mind, if you're bringing those things in to a drawing that are already defined, they are going to take on the properties of what's already defined and not this one. So making sure that you use that, the REAL, reload all line types command, I would say maybe is a good way to see if you've accidentally used the wrong line type size. Maybe it was the metric version versus the imperial. So real is a good way to kind of try and get that set back. I don't know if there's anything else that I missed.
I think it's good. Yeah, obviously line types is a bigger thing, and
Yeah.
understandable, but it does, when it comes down to it, it really is part of sheet setup. When sheet setup is done correctly, it should be a don't even have to worry about it sort of thing. But
Uh-huh.
but anyway, yeah, I think we need a whole webinar actually on line types, and line type scale would
I
actually
agree.
be a great webinar. It's that big
I've
of
a
a
lot of
subject.
tears and blood and sweat have gone into the knowledge base article we've put together for LT and PSLT scale. So
And then anyway, and then another one. This should be just a fun way to wrap up if you want to go back to model space. But Sarah just had a great question of what are the pros and cons of inserting plants using the via the blocks or via planting. And I took that to mean kind of via the AutoCAD insert command, um, and versus using our blocks. And the main thing is just showing that using our tool to insert any block, even a generic block,
yeah.
gives you all these additional keyboard commands and more control over the scale and the rotation. But even just the keyboard commands alone are kind of worth the price of admission as far as I'm concerned, compared to just the native AutoCAD inserting a block.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, like to be able to place a block at the scale at which it's supposed to be versus having to manually scale, and then just using those additional commands to even take that and apply it to those kind of things to interact with those block definitions a lot better. Like the land effects functions of those outweigh the I can where is it, insert, I can go in here and I can try to find what it is, and then I can look at it and I can look at its properties and see how it is that I need to try and use these simple little guys here. But there's just so much more manual stuff that has to be done that way than simply using even our, like you said, even our generic version for that. So place it, scale it up. Hold on, my mouse is jittery. Scale it up, and then it holds that for what it is. Place another one at a different scale, Man, my mouse is really struggling right now. We'll stop it there, but placing them and just having that flexibility, like you said. So
Exactly. And I think on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up.
great.
This, like we said, this is kind of culminates our CAD for Beginners series. If there are things you want us to cover, please let us know. Like, we got a great idea for line types. That's another good idea for one. We really need to know, what things you're struggling with, what things you want to just become an expert with, and we can kind of plan out future webinars. So let us know. Other than that, have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks, guys.